Here we go. Raghu, thank you so much for being here today. So, yesterday we heard about the new corporate law that the UAE has introduced. It will be introducing in 2023. We're talking about 9% tax on company profits. Obviously, there are exceptions, and we will be talking about those. So, this tax is basically was expected. It is for two main reasons. One is to prepare for the global minimum tax that is upcoming, and two is obviously to support government revenues and diversify them. Let's start with the first, with the last point that I mentioned, the government revenues. What impact does this tax imply on government revenues for the UAE? And how can we compare it to the VAT tax that was announced like a couple of years back?
Always a pleasure talking to you, Lynn. I think that angle is very important in terms of what impact this will have on the non-oil revenues of the UAE government. Uh, Based on a very simple back of the envelope calculation that I just did, using the gross value added calculation that IMF produced in 2015, my estimate is that it will augment non-oil revenues to the extent of about 15%. Remember, in 2018, when VAT was introduced, VAT had an impact of about 10%. So this is much bigger than VAT, and obviously it's in the right direction from the UAE economy point of view, because they have to diversify their sources of revenues. They cannot always dependent on oil, and this is definitely a step in the right direction. And 9% is definitely a very palatable number compared to what
Yeah,
other GCC countries are charging right now, or what
yeah.
OECD countries are charging right now.
Uh, is the process or are the details clear or they're not set yet? And I'm talking about like where will the revenues go? Will they go to each emirate separately, or will they directly go to the federal budget? Are these
Yeah,
details clear or
I
not yet?
think we have some time to sort out those issues. It's going to kick in only from June 2023. So I'm sure more details will be forthcoming. But in terms of details, at least it's very clear as to where it applies and where it does not apply. And it's also clear from a implementation perspective. Like, for example, through VAT, they already have the digital mechanism to track taxes and charge them. So I don't think it will be an operational nightmare to launch this. But what is still not very clear is in the case of VAT, I mean, there is a mechanism by which 70% of the VAT revenue will go back to the emirate that from where it came. But in the case of corporate tax, I hope it will be a very similar structure. Uh,
Mhm.
that is something that we need to wait and see as to how the kitty will be shared by the Emirates.
We talked about government, the government. Let's talk about the companies and the impact on companies. When we say 9%, it's not just the 9% itself. It's also the audits. It's also applying and being aligned with international standards or with the standards required by the UAE, and that's obviously extra cost for companies. Will the impact be bigger than these 9% per se? What are we expecting when it comes to the like the burden, like the financial burden on the company?
Definitely. I mean, doing business in any GCC country will involve a lot of expenses in the form of visa and other license fees and stuff like that. But also, you have to watch the threshold for the tax. They've kept it at about 100,000 USD, after which the tax kicks in. In my personal opinion, that's too low a threshold, which means a lot of companies will come under the tax net, and that might be a negative, especially for small and medium enterprises. So it would be good if that threshold is increased. I know 9% is a very attractive number, but the threshold is not that attractive compared to the 9%. So already the small and medium enterprise companies are paying a lot of money in other forms, like, as I said,
Hmm.
visa license fee and what have you. So if this kicks in very early at about 100,000 USD, I think that's going to be problematic for many companies.
And will it discourage small companies to scale up in the UAE because they will face more burdens?
Absolutely. So that's more than scaling up. Of course, the tax net will be very broad, because it will include any company with a profit of about 100,000 USD. So
Hmm.
that's when a lot of companies will have to start paying these taxes. So that will definitely, your point is right. It will, derail the process of scaling up to an
Hmm.
extent. So it will be good if, SMEs can be encouraged by a higher threshold.
And will there be, do you expect there to be any revision to other fees that companies do currently pay in certain sectors, like in telecom sector, for example?
I don't think so because that would then become a very messy situation to deal with. So each one has their own structure in terms of how they deal with the eventual
Hmm.
customers, right? So taxation is a very different topic altogether, and I don't think they will. It will be great if they can do that. If they can take a
Hmm.
holistic view and control the cost from a consumer point of view, but I doubt that will happen in the short
And
term.
and do you expect different, like a different impact on the different sectors? What will be the sectors like that will be more impacted by this?
So far, I think the oil and gas is excluded, and
Yeah.
capital gains is excluded. But other than that, pretty much any company that operates
Mm.
within the emirate will be hit by this tax. So I don't think it will
And
be any sector-specific implication.
and speaking of exclusion, we also have, the free zone companies that will be excluded from this tax. So is that an implication that foreign investments will not be impacted because most of the international companies or companies that are backed by international investments are in those free zones? Is that what you expect?
Maybe this will start pushing more companies towards the free zone. But I remember free zone is not also free. You need to pay an annual cost, to be
Yeah.
based there actually. So you have to weigh the pros and cons of all the calculations before you decide on whether you should be based in a free zone or a non-free zone. But
Mhm.
obviously, that's an exclusion worth looking at. Real estate capital gains is another exclusion worth looking at, actually. So there are many areas that they have excluded the purview of this tax, but otherwise, it will generally apply to all the companies that earn profits from the shores of UAE.
Do you expect companies to start investing more in assets, investing more in maybe acquisitions to kind of adjust to this tax? Will there be any operational changes when it comes to the way they use their capital, the capital they have?
I think more than that, tax is a cost, right? Apart from other costs. So the focus from a company point of view will shift more towards managing costs. So
Hmm.
now we have 9% more cost to contend with. So it depends on your pricing power whether we can pass on this cost to the end consumers. There are sectors that has the pricing power. There are sectors that don't have the pricing power. So it will be a very, I think the focus will now shift to, of course, growth and profitability should always be the first focus, but now the more important focus or the
Hmm.
role of chief financial officers would be to really see how to efficiently manage the cost in order to take this additional burden.
Good luck to all the financial officers out
So,
there trying to figure that change out. Thank you so much, Raghu, for this.
always a pleasure, Len. Thank you very much.